Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some seriously thought-provoking ideas about happiness and control and what it actually means to be human.
Oh, yeah, some really big questions.
Yeah, our main source material today is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, and we'll also be using this really fascinating YouTube video called The Idea of a Perfect Happy Society is a Disaster Brave New World to kind of guide our exploration.
It's a classic of the dystopian genre, for sure. But you know what makes Brave New World so compelling is that it kind of flips the script on how we normally think about these oppressive societies.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so used to dystopias like 1984, where control is maintained through like fear and violence.
Okay.
You know?
Big Brother's watching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in Brave New World, everyone is like seemingly happy all the time. They have no wants, they have no worries. But like, is that really a good thing?
That's the real question, isn't it? The video argues that this happiness that they have, it's like manufactured a carefully constructed illusion.
Right.
Designed to keep the citizens complacent and compliant. And one of the key tools they use for maintaining this control is a drug called Soma.
Soma, right? I mean, it's basically instant bliss in a pill form.
That's it.
You just wipe away any negative emotions. But,
yeah,
you know, it makes you wonder, though, what happens to a society that just eliminates all negativity? Like, don't we need some level of discomfort to grow, to innovate, to even recognize what real happiness is?
Absolutely. I mean, the video brings up a really interesting point about what eliminating negative emotions does to us psychologically.
Yeah.
Think about it, like when we experience sadness or anger, it often motivates us to change something, to fight for something better.
Right.
But in Brave New World, those emotions, they're just erased.
Gone.
Leaving the citizens with no drive to question or challenge anything.
That's a chilling thought. It's like they're being robbed of their, their agency.
Yeah.
Their ability to even just recognize that something might be wrong. And the video draws a really interesting parallel to the work of B.F. Skinner.
Oh, yeah.
The psychologist who studied operant conditioning.
Yeah.
Do you know about that?
Absolutely. Skinner found that you could actually shape behavior more effectively through positive reinforcement like rewards than through punishment.
Interesting.
And in a way, that's exactly what's happening in Brave New World. The citizens are constantly rewarded with pleasure and comfort.
Right.
Making them much less likely to rebel or question the system that's in place.
Right. It's kind of like, giving a dog a treat every time it sits, and eventually the dog will sit without even thinking about it.
There you go. Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about our own world, right? Are we being conditioned in similar ways? I mean, think about social media.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Every notification, every retweet, it's like a little dopamine hit, reinforcing our desire to just keep scrolling and to stay engaged.
Right.
Even if it's not necessarily making us happy.
It's definitely food for thought, and Brave New World takes this idea of control through pleasure to a whole other level. One of the ways that the world state maintains its power is by just eliminating individuality altogether. And it starts with this thing called the Bonhoeffer process.
Right, the Bonhoeffer process. Oh, it's creepy. It's this technology that allows them to mass produce identical humans.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally churn out dozens of clones from a single embryo.
It's wild.
Essentially just erasing the very concept of uniqueness.
Yeah. They're creating a society of robots, essentially all programmed to think and behave the same way.
Yeah, and that's precisely the point, right? This control over reproduction has a direct impact on the concept of individuality, which, as the video highlights, has serious implications for free will.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if we're all essentially copies of each other, conditioned from birth to think and behave in a certain way, how can we truly exercise free will?
Right.
I mean, are we even capable of making genuine choices at that point?
It's almost like they're pre-programmed with a set of acceptable desires.
Right.
That eliminates the need for choice altogether.
Right. And they take it a step further with this thing called hypnopedic conditioning, which is basically sleep teaching.
Sleep teaching. That's right. Imagine being bombarded with messages while you're sleeping.
Wild.
Shaping your thoughts and desires without you even realizing it.
Yeah.
It's subliminal advertising on steroids.
It's pretty insidious. And it's not just about shaping individual thoughts. It's about creating a society where everyone accepts their place without question.
Precisely. And to really solidify this control the world state goes to the extreme of banning books, banning history, banning religion, anything that might offer like an alternative perspective.
Wow.
This is a really important point because that elimination of diverse viewpoints totally prevents critical thinking, ensuring that the citizens all stay comfortably within the boundaries set by the world controllers.
It's scary because if you don't have access to different perspectives, how can you even begin to question the world you live in?
Exactly. And, the video makes the point that this deliberate suppression of knowledge makes the citizens incredibly vulnerable to manipulation.
Right.
It's like they're living in an echo chamber where they only hear the same ideas repeated over and over again.
Right.
You lose the ability to think for yourself, to analyze information, to form your own conclusions.
And it's not just the lack of information, it's the fear of even seeking it out.
Yeah.
The citizens are conditioned to be afraid of anything that challenges the status quo.
Right.
Anything that might disrupt their carefully curated happiness.
Exactly. And this is where we start to see little cracks in this seemingly perfect society.
Yes.
Because not everyone is totally content, even in a world that is designed to eliminate unhappiness.
Right, exactly. And that brings us to this really intriguing character, Bernard Marx.
Oh, yeah, Bernard.
He's an alpha, one of the elite, but something about him is just different.
He's different. What's so fascinating about Bernard is that he feels like such an outsider, even within this supposedly perfect society.
Yeah.
He's physically different, which leads him to question the world state's obsession with uniformity.
Right.
But he's also just more introspective than his peers. And this leads him to actually crave something more than just the shallow pleasures and distractions that surround him.
Right. And then there's John the Savage, who was raised completely outside the world state on a reservation.
On the reservation.
And he represents such a stark contrast to the conditioned citizen, having experienced real emotion, real struggles,
right,
real love.
Real love.
All the things the world state has tried to just completely erase.
And that's why he can see the cracks in their manufactured happiness.
Right.
He's actually repulsed by their casual attitude towards sex,
right,
which he views as something sacred, something connected to deep emotions and commitment.
Interesting.
And this clash really highlights a key theme that's explored in the video, which is, the dehumanizing aspects of a society that prioritizes pleasure and stability above all else.
I want to hear more about that, but I think that's a perfect place to pause for now.
Yeah, let's take a break. Welcome back. Last time we left off, we were just about to get into John the Savage and his very unique perspective on the world state.
Yeah, John is so interesting because he just had a completely different upbringing than anyone else in the world state. He grew up on a reservation, and life there is definitely not perfect, but it's real. He's experienced pain and loss and love, all those things that the world state has tried to completely eliminate.
And because of that, he can see the cracks, in their manufactured happiness. He's repulsed by their casual attitude towards sex,
right,
which he views as something that should be sacred, something connected to really deep emotions and commitment. Yeah. And this clash between what he believes and what they believe really highlights a key theme that's explored in the video. The dehumanizing aspects of a society that prioritizes pleasure and stability above all else.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more? What exactly makes the world state so dehumanized?
Well, it starts with their control over reproduction. With the Bonhoeffer process we talked about earlier, it basically reduces humans to just manufactured commodity. They're not born, they're produced like products on an assembly line with their predetermined social roles already encoded in their genes.
That's a chilling thought. It's like they're denying people their basic humanity right from the very beginning.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the physical process of creation. Hypnopedic conditioning ensures that people are mentally and emotionally molded to fit into their assigned roles. This constant barrage of suggestions, reinforced throughout their lives, just leaves very little room for individual thought or dissent.
Yeah, it's like they're being programmed from birth to be these happy little cogs in a machine.
That's a good way to put it.
And if you never question your programming, how can you ever truly be free?
That is the question. And the video connects this whole idea of dehumanization to the world state's erasure of history and culture. The citizens are taught to view the past as primitive and chaotic, something to be avoided at all costs.
Interesting.
But without a sense of history, without an understanding of, the struggles and triumphs that have shaped humanity, they just lose a vital part of their identity.
It's almost like they've been robbed of their collective memory.
Yeah.
They have no context, no frame of reference for anything outside of the world state's carefully constructed reality.
And this lack of context makes them so susceptible to manipulation. Yeah. They're essentially living in a perpetual present with no understanding of the past or vision for the future. They just accept things as they are and never question the forces that are shaping their lives.
It's like they're trapped in this gilded cage, surrounded by comfort and pleasure, but completely cut off from the richness and complexity of the human experience.
Yeah, and the video makes this really interesting connection between this loss of history and the role of technology in the world state.
Right.
Technology, in a sense, has replaced spirituality. The citizens find comfort and meaning not in religion or philosophy, but in gadgets and entertainment. Their spiritual longings are fulfilled by this constant stream of distractions and pleasures that technology just provides.
That's a fascinating point. It's like technology has become their opiate, numbing them to these deeper questions of existence.
Precisely. And this reliance on technology for fulfillment, it has some pretty disturbing parallels to our own world. We're increasingly turning to our devices for connection, for entertainment, for validation.
Right.
And while technology can be a powerful tool for good, there's a real danger in letting it replace genuine human connection and critical thinking.
You're so right. The video even highlights the work of Sherry Turkle, who's written extensively about how technology is changing the way that we communicate.
Yeah, Sherry Turkle.
She argues that we're becoming alone together, connected through our devices, but increasingly isolated from real human interaction.
And that isolation can have a huge impact on our sense of self and our ability to empathize with others.
Right.
If we're constantly interacting with screens, how do we learn to read facial expressions or to understand body language?
Right.
To pick up on those subtle cues that are so essential to human communication.
It's a sobering thought. It seems like Huxley was really onto something with his warnings about technology and how it could dehumanize us.
I think so, too. And this brings us back to John the Savage and his struggles to adapt to the world state's values.
Right.
He really represents the human element that the world state has tried so hard to erase. He feels things so deeply. He questions everything, and he just refuses to be molded into their idea of what a human being should be.
And his rejection of Soma is a perfect example of that. He doesn't want to numb himself to pain or discomfort. He actually sees those emotions as, essential to the human experience.
Right. And his attraction to Lenina,
right,
a young woman who really embodies the world state's free love philosophy, further highlights that clash between his values and those of the society that he's been thrust into.
Yeah.
He's drawn to her beauty and spirit, but he's totally horrified by her casual attitude toward sex.
It's such a powerful contrast. Lenina is like a product of her environment, completely comfortable with the world state's norms, while John sees those norms as just shallow and meaningless.
Exactly. And his struggle to reconcile these two conflicting viewpoints ultimately leads to his downfall.
I am so curious to hear more about that.
Yeah.
But before we delve into John's tragic fate, maybe we should just take a moment to reflect on the broader implications of his story.
Yeah, that's a good point. John's experience in the world state raises some really important questions about the nature of happiness.
Right.
And, the dangers of seeking it at all costs.
Yeah.
Like, is it actually possible to be truly happy in a society that eliminates all negativity, all challenges, all individuality?
Right.
Or is that kind of happiness just an illusion?
Yeah.
A shallow substitute for a truly meaningful life?
Those are some deep questions, and I think they're ones that each of us has to grapple with in our own lives. But I'm eager to hear how John's story plays out. Like, what happens to him in this world that is so foreign to everything that he knows?
Well, his journey takes a bit of a dark turn. I'm afraid he tries to resist the world state's values, but he finds himself caught in this web of despair and
So what happens? Does he manage to find any peace or any sense of belonging in the world state?
Unfortunately, no. His story ends pretty tragically. He succumbs to despair and takes his own life, unable to reconcile his yearning for freedom and authenticity with the world state's suffocating.
That's heartbreaking. But I suppose his fate serves as a really powerful warning. Like, what does John's tragic end tell us about the dangers of the world state's approach to happiness and control?
Well, I think John's death really highlights the dehumanizing consequences of suppressing individuality and eliminating negative emotions.
Right.
He shows us that a life without struggle, without pain, without the freedom to choose your own path is no life at all. His story reminds us that true happiness, it can't be manufactured. It has to be earned through experience, through connection, through the full spectrum of human emotion.
That's a really profound takeaway, and I think it speaks to the heart of Huxley's warning in Brave New World. He's not just criticizing this fictional dystopia. He's challenging us to think critically about our own values, our own pursuits, and the potential consequences of prioritizing comfort and stability over freedom and authenticity.
Exactly. And the video makes a really compelling argument that so many of the themes explored in Brave New World are eerily relevant to our own world.
I'm really curious to delve into those parallels, but I think that's a perfect place to pause for now.
Yeah. Let's take another break.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Brave New World, and we've explored this kind of chilling world that Huxley created. But now we're really interested in connecting it to our own lives. Like what aspects of this dystopia feel kind of eerily familiar in the world that we live in today?
Well, it's pretty fascinating to consider how Huxley writing, almost a century ago, seemed to anticipate certain trends that we're seeing today.
Right.
And the video that we're using points out some really striking parallels, starting with our relationship with technology.
Right. There was like a huge theme in the book, the
Yeah.
way technology was used to control people's thoughts, their desires,
Right.
even their biology.
Exactly. And while we haven't quite reached that level of technological control that's depicted in the book,
All right.
there are some, unsettling similarities. I mean, just think about the constant stream of information and entertainment that we're exposed to every day, the way algorithms curate our online experiences, is the addictive nature of social media.
Yeah, it's true. It often feels like we're just bombarded with distractions.
Yeah.
Constantly being pulled in a million different directions.
Yeah.
So do you think that has the potential to like numb us in the same way that Soma did for the citizens of the world state?
I think it's definitely a possibility. The video argues that this constant pursuit of instant gratification, whether it's social media or streaming services or even just online shopping, it creates a kind of mental fog that makes it harder to focus on what really matters.
Yeah. And not only that, but it also seems like we're kind of losing our ability to tolerate discomfort, to just sit with those like difficult emotions.
Yeah.
Just like the citizens of the world state reached for Soma. At the first sign of unhappiness, we reach for our phones, our favorite shows, did anything to avoid feeling those like uncomfortable feelings.
That's a great point. And this inability to tolerate discomfort, it has some real implications for our ability to grow and learn.
Right.
Because, it's often through facing challenges and working through those difficult emotions that we gain wisdom and resilience.
One thing that really struck me about Brave New World was the way that casual sex was used as a tool for control. The citizens were encouraged to engage in these like meaningless encounters, completely devoid of any real emotional connection. Do you see any parallels to that in our own society?
The video definitely draws some interesting connections there. I mean, easy access to pornography, the hookup culture that's often promoted in media and online dating, the emphasis on physical pleasure over emotional intimacy, all of these things kind of contribute to a view of sex that can feel at times a little dehumanizing.
Right. And this detachment from emotional connection, I feel like it makes it harder to form those really meaningful relationships, to experience true love in it.
Exactly. And it also kind of feeds into the consumerist mindset that we see in both Brave New World and our own society. Just like the world state encourages people to constantly consume new goods and experiences, we're bombarded with messages telling us to buy more, do more, be more.
Yeah, it's this constant cycle of wanting and acquiring.
Yeah.
Never really feeling satisfied.
Yeah.
And it's all designed to keep us distracted, to prevent us from questioning the system.
Precisely. And the video raises this really important question. What happens to our capacity for critical thinking when we're constantly bombarded with these messages, when our attention spans are shrinking and these complex issues are reduced to just sound bites and clickbait headlines?
It's a scary thought. It feels like we're becoming more and more susceptible to manipulation, just like the citizens in Brave New World.
And this brings us back to, I think, Huxley's most potent warning, the danger of choosing comfort and security over freedom and individuality.
Right.
The world state offers its citizens a life free from pain and suffering.
Right.
But at what cost? They've sacrificed their autonomy, their creativity, their very humanity in exchange for this shallow and ultimately meaningless existence.
So given all of this, what can we do? Like, how can we resist these forces and safeguard our own freedom of thought in this increasingly complex and technologically driven world?
Well, it's a tough question, but I think the first step is just awareness. By understanding the subtle ways in which control can manifest, whether it's through technology or consumerism or this constant pursuit of pleasure, we can start to make more conscious choices about, how we're living our lives.
That makes sense. So it's about being mindful of how we're spending our time, what we're consuming and who we're allowing to influence our thoughts and beliefs.
Exactly. And it's also about cultivating critical thinking skill. We need to question the information that we're given, seek out diverse perspectives, and engage in meaningful conversations about the challenges that are facing our society.
At the end of the video, they pose this really thought-provoking question. They ask, if Huxley were alive today, what would he think about our world? What aspects might delight him and what might just totally horrify him?
That is a really interesting question to think about.
Yeah.
I think Huxley would be both fascinated and appalled by the world that we live in today.
Right.
He might be delighted by our technological advancements, our access to information, our efforts to create a more just and equitable society. But I also think he would be pretty horrified by our addiction to technology, our consumerist culture, and our willingness to sacrifice privacy and freedom in the name of security and convenience.
Yeah, it's a really powerful reminder that the future isn't predetermined. We have the power to shape the world that we want to live in, but it requires us to be engaged, informed, and willing to challenge the status quo.
Absolutely. And I think that's the ultimate takeaway from our deep dive into Brave New World. It's a call to action, a challenge to each of us to think critically about the world around us and to make conscious choices that preserve our humanity, our freedom, and our capacity.
So well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us on this thought-provoking journey.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some new insights into the power of stories, the dangers of unchecked control, and the importance of staying engaged in the world around you.
Remember, the future is not something that happens to us, it's something that we create.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those aha moments.